Welcome back to the 99, where we are focused on brewing a better competitive commander. I'm your host, Patrick Marlatt, and today I have another Hidden Gems video for you. This time we're discussing cards in red. Now, unlike every other color, surprisingly, red has the least amount of unused cards. And that is to say, when red's cards are good, they're overly used. I mean cards like Dockside Extortionist, Underworld Breach, so on and so forth. Those staples, Red Elemental Blast, Pyroblast, they're seen everywhere. However, when red cards are bad, they're never seen. However, I do have a few pet cards and gems for you that I want to talk about today. Cards I find extremely valuable, not only in a cEDH meta, but in Commander at large. So whether you play competitively or casually, this video should be good for you. Now, before we jump into the topic, I want to let you all know that the best way to support this channel, if you enjoy these Hidden Gems videos, the gameplay episodes, and our talking segments, you can help support it by joining the Patreon. Of course, all the benefits to being a Patreon member are listed in the description down below, or rather through the link in the description. But at the end of this video, I'll be thanking my patrons personally and voicing the opinion on the monthly topic of one of our Brew crew members. The monthly topic for November is, should casual and competitive have separate ban lists? And this has been a really fun topic to explore on the channel with a good diversity of opinions, but an overwhelming majority believe that they should have the same ban list. However, there have been some really fair arguments as to why they should be separated. Now, if you'd like to know my opinions on the matter, you of course can watch my video on this very topic that I aired at the end of last month. Now, to jump into the topic at hand, like every Hidden Gems video, I'm going to go ahead and leave the list in a pinned comment down below, so if you want to follow along, you can join me there. However, I am going to be going over every single card via Scryfall. So if you see me looking off the screen, it has totally nothing to do with you. It's everything to do with this video. Now I'm going to be going over control magic, damage magic, destruction, interaction. We've listed some forms of interaction, but I mean stack interaction, as well as a little freebie for you, ramp. And this is more of a pet card than anything else, but it is a favorite of mine. The first card I want to discuss, one that is seeing more value with the cards that are being printed, particularly with Commander Legends, is Claim the Firstborn. Now, this is a card that I really loved when it initially came out. It's seen use in some of my lists and has been removed, but I think I'm going to slot it back in the lists that like to sacrifice creatures more aggressively. Here's why. Claim Firstborn for 1 red sorcery speed. At uncommon, gain control of target creature with converted mana cost 3 or less until end of turn. Now, this can be creatures you control or those your opponents control. And that's important because you get to untap that creature. It gains haste until the end of turn. So essentially, if your commander is 3 CMC or under, this is a 1 CMC haste spell. And at the end of the day, that's really not bad. I think that's a fair trade for 1 CMC. However, if you're going up against an opposing Tymna, well, there's some free draw for you. A Savala, there's some free ramp. I've got a creature with 5 power. Why don't I make mana out of that? Why don't I just grab that Kinnan instead and make a lot of mana out of all my rocks and permanents that tap for mana? So clearly there's more to claim the Firstborn, not your Firstborn, although I might. No, never, don't worry, your kids are safe. Claim the Firstborn is fantastic, particularly against the slew of hate bears we're seeing. And there's a ton to list just from this year alone. Drannith Magistrate was the big one earlier on this year, but recently, the likes of Opposition Agent and Hull Breacher, I gotta tell you, it'd be great to take a Hull Breacher and I'm in red. Why don't I cast my own wheel? Why don't I just see all these cards and you see nothing? Yes, Claim Firstborn, very fantastic, particularly because all those hate bears, they definitely rest 3 CMC or under. Like, you're going to be able to take it, provided you want the benefit or not from them, but usually to skirt past it. So let's just say I have my Demonic Tutor in hand and there's an Opposition Agent. Well, this allows me to get past that very comfortably by putting it on my side of the board. And you know what? When I'm done, why don't I use that Diabolic Intent that was in my hand instead and just get rid of this thing? Now, sometimes you don't want to provide the board that kind of opportunity. If you can just take it, do what you need to do, give it back, then no harm, no foul. However, they're usually big enough threats to remove. You know, if your list operates mid-range, this is going to be a good card for you. I think Claim the Firstborn, not so much valuable in a more proactive list, unless you know you're going against lists that have creature-based strategies that are valuable for you. Because again, 1 CMC is not much at all to take 3 CMC worth of value, whatever that creature may be. So easily one of my favorite cards. The only thing that could make this better is if it was instant, but that's a little too much. I mean, I think it would have to be a rare if this was instant. That's pretty insane. But fantastic card. Definitely a worthwhile include if you're dealing with a lot of hate bears. And again, I'm going to go over some use cases for you all with these cards, and of course lists that you should put these in. Again, more proactive list, probably don't want this card. But the next card I want to talk about, speaking of hate bears, I mean, there's a ton of creatures that this hits, and this is one of the more unique shocks that the game has built around, specifically because it has this keyword in it, sudden shock. For 1 generic, 1 red, I did a horrible job explaining this one, but instant speed, split second. That's really what I'm getting at. One of the best keywords, the most aggressive, most vicious keywords ever printed in Magic. So if you don't know what split second does, as long as the spell is on the stack, players can't cast spells or activate abilities that aren't mana abilities. So basically you're useless at this point. You just need to watch whatever is going to happen. Now at instant speed, you deal 2 damage to target creature or player. This has obviously been eroded to any target, so you can hit planeswalkers with this should you like. However, I don't know, I just named Timna and what else did I name? They're Kinnan. Kinnan's a 2/2. Shock them. Why not just shock them? Obviously, those are just value pieces for someone's strategy. But if there's also a Hull Breacher opposition agent, go ahead and shock them. Drannith Magistrate skirts past this effect, unfortunately, but there are other hate bears out there that are still relevant and still played. Even Mind Sensors, Notion Thieves when you can't find your Hull Breacher. This card is really fantastic at shutting down any of those hate bears because it has the keyword split second on it. You really can't find a replacement for something like this. You know, obviously, this is essentially saying the card is uncounterable in many cases, and there's really nothing your opponents can do about this shock hitting them, right? So you can activate mana abilities, but I don't know what you're doing that for. Unless the thing that was getting hit was like a mana dork, then maybe you would want to activate it and just have mana floating in whatever phase you were in. However, sudden shock, fantastic. Any card with utility that's useful that says split second is fantastic, particularly because a lot of the threats nowadays that I'm seeing have 2 defense and under, and a lot of people don't run enough removal. So in case you're looking to bolster your removal suite, this is definitely a good one. Heck, I'm even using Lightning Bolt these days, and that's sort of an unsung hero in Commander. It's very rarely used in cEDH. So far as casual games are concerned, I'm not sure. Maybe you guys use Lightning Bolt left and right, but Sudden Shock, another good one. Definitely valuable in my opinion, especially if you're putting someone's commander down. You just make it that much harder for them to roll out that value engine and or that strategy. Sudden Shock. If that doesn't do it for you though, and I'm going to move on to another damaging card. All of these are really good utilities versus all the cards I've mentioned, and this one in particular, no need to tilt your head, I'll read it off for you, is Dead and Gone. Dead, Gone. Dead deals 2 damage to target creature, so a little less versatile than our Sudden Shock. However, if creatures are your biggest concern, then this is fantastic. For all the same creatures I mentioned prior, this is going to be a fantastic piece of removal. However, for Gone, you pay 2 generic, 1 red, return target creature you don't control to its owner's hand. Bounce outside of blue, that's rare, and for 3 CMC, so it kind of falls in line with what you'd expect. And unfortunately, it doesn't hit your own creatures, so sadly, your own dockside is not able to be bounced with this spell. However, this is really fantastic if you want to remove a hate bear momentarily to give yourself the opportunity to commit to a certain action. And or Gone is simply there for bouncing a threat that 2 damage wouldn't otherwise kill. So if your opponent's commander is part of a winning strategy, let's just say it's Godo. If they have a Godo out and they're about to go off with a helm, they have their Brass Squire, tap the Brass Squire, attach the thing to the thing, you're like, nah, you just put that in your hand instead. Now, unfortunately, in that particular scenario, you're giving that Godo player another opportunity to have an ETB, grab another item, but if that was the worst case scenario, then this only goes up from there, right? Dead, Gone, fantastic. Maybe not for the list that really cares about a low CMC, because mind you, these dual cards have the combined total of both casting costs. So this is going to be 4 CMC total. So I've been using something like Ad Nauseam. Obviously, this hurts to rip off the top. Dark Confidant, this is going to hurt to see off the top. Dark Tutelage, same story. You're going to want to avoid Dead and Gone in those scenarios. So Rakdos, that cares about a low curve, maybe. However, for the most part, I think this is a fantastic utility for not only removing threats, but bouncing ones you can't otherwise damage out. And again, more removal. I think most of this red video is advocating for more removal. I do think we need to run more of it in games of cEDH in particular. Again, I don't know how you casual folks roll, but tell me, do you run enough removal? Or are there just threats looming on the board for multiple turns? Let me know. However, next card I want to talk about. Speaking of removal, we're moving on to destruction now, and I mean specifically artifact destruction, and this is easily my favorite card. I've been playing this card for years. I own multiple copies of this card. I had it altered. I just am obsessed with this card because it's so valuable, and I don't usually rely on artifact ramp like a lot of my opposing opponent strategies do. And this card is called Meltdown. You'll see why I like it so much in a second. Meltdown for X and a red, sorcery speed, destroy each artifact with the total casting cost of X or less. And this has been errata to destroy each artifact with a converted mana cost of X or less. Now this means anything from Mox Diamonds to Chrome Moxes to treasures that might be on the board and unspent to, hey, is that a jeweled amulet? Now mind you, that is just paying for the red and not putting anything into X. However, this is X or less. So what if there's also a soul ring, a mana vault, whatever's on the board? And though I'm just naming off artifacts you see commonly, right? Any 2 CMC and under artifact ramp that is valuable for a list that's outside of green, you generally see the arcane signets to the grim monoliths and all the way down, right? You're gonna find a lot of artifact-based ramp, and this is gonna knock out all of it. Does it matter that I hit my own mana crypt? Yes and no, if it also means I'm destroying 6 other artifacts in the midst of doing that. So I like to run this in Gruul list where I can reliably use dorks to get my ramp out instead. And my Gruul lists have actually been benefiting from the lack of removal I see in these games. Like sometimes you'll see a Toxic Deluge still, and that's good. Maybe a Fire Covenant, but single target removal, nada. So creature-based ramp, super healthy right now, at least with my meta. Meltdown, super good against everyone else I'm playing against. It's fantastic. If you are looking for an alternative to your Bifrost, your replicating Shattering Spree, your Vandal Blast, this is the one in my book. This is the one I usually go to first, but it really depends on the list. Again, if you're going to rely on an artifact strategy, or you have low CMC pieces of equipment, maybe it's one of those new Boros commanders that's drawing you cards consistently if you have, you know, equipment attached to your creature. So there's Akiri, and then there's that new one who also came out in like a pre-con. Draw cards off of auras and equipment. I forget his name, his or her name. You can tell me. I'm gonna probably leave it on the screen. So obviously, if you're playing one of those commanders, you're not going to want to destroy your own thing with Meltdown, but if you do have it in your hand, you can play it, you play for the timing of it, right? So you're not going to just lay down equipment to destroy with this anyways. So maybe even then. However, mid to late game, if you draw this and you've had your board set up, of course, this is not going to be the optimum play, but early on when people are setting up, this is so good. And you've seen a lot of our gameplay videos. You know how people like to ramp out instantaneously on their first and second turns. Well, this sets them back down to turn 1. And most of the times they've kept hands where, you know, 2 or 3 of those cards was just like very quick ramp, like fast mana. Use it, enjoy it, report back, tell me what you think. Now, I wanted to talk about stacks interaction because not many colors outside of blue get to interact with the stack in a meaningful way, sadly. They have most all the counter spells, most all the redirects, things to bounce spells back into players' hands. Obviously, that's sort of what blue's known for, and no one else for some reason. However, red does and has been getting more of redirects. So maybe you've heard of Ricochet Trap. You've definitely heard of Deflecting Swat, right? Change the target of a spell or ability. And you get to do that for free if you have your commander. Paraphrasing. Put that on the screen. However, the card I want to talk about today is more niche in its likelihood of being an effective spell. However, Bolt Bend for 3 generic and 1 red, instant speed. Why am I talking about a 4 CMC card? This spell costs 3 less to cast if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. Okay, so obviously this is telling you the type of deck this should go into immediately. Change the target of target spell or ability with a single target. Now, not as good as Deflecting Swat, obviously. It's vanilla text without the cost reduction. For CMC to do that is not very good relative to something like Deflecting Swat. But if you do want more ways to manipulate the stack and interact with the stack, this is a great way to do that, pending you have a creature that is consistently 4 power or greater. Something like Neheb, this is very good in. Something like Zerko Helm Smasher, this is extremely good in. Obviously, it's going to be very deck dependent on your commander. I think a lot of aggro strategies, commanders that rely on doing massive equipment like your Voltron build, where they just get the power of 4 or greater, this is going to be very good for, making sure you protect that commander as you go along with your turns. But natural 4 power or greater is ideal here. And of course, this is just a fantastic way to bounce around counters, and you don't even need to use it on your own things. Of course, you can interact in a counter war and make sure it goes favorably on your end, depending on what's being countered or what's trying to be resolved, rather, in that circumstance. But the use cases for this are less than the other cards I've mentioned. I would say that everything up to this point has been very good for a majority of lists, where this one is definitely narrower in its ability to be effective for you. However, I love this card in the list I do run it in. I run it in Neheb, of course. It's a 5/4 body, so we're at threshold. But if you have a list that manipulates commander, again, with the power 4 or greater, why not use a 1 CMC spell? I say 1 CMC. Again, another one of those scenarios where this is a bad ad nos card. However, it's still good in the list that can utilize it. Now, lastly, the last card I want to talk about in the category of ramp, a little bit of a pet card. Any opportunity I get to talk about Lannery, Captain Lannery that is, I will. So Captain Lannery Storm, for 2 generic, 1 red, legendary creature, human pirate, 2/2 body. Haste, whenever Captain Lannery Storm attacks, create a colorless treasure artifact token with tap, sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. We all know what treasure does. However, whenever you sacrifice a treasure, Captain Lannery gets +1/+0 until the end of turn. She just loves that booty. So, here's what's good about Captain Lannery. Very easy to put out on turn 1, right? Very easy to just put out depending on your deck strategy. And most of us use like the Ancient Tombs, the Mana Crypts, all the fast mana to pump out a 3 CMC creature from the get-go. But something like a Lotus Petal and an Ancient Tomb will do this. Something like a Mountain and a Mana Crypt will do this. And then she winds up paying for herself over time. What I like about this, and she's outshined by another pirate, might have mentioned him earlier, Dockside Extortionist. Yeah, she's outshined by Dockside, but Dockside is dependent on the board state. It's usually going to net you a lot of treasures, but sometimes there are maybe just 1 or 2 artifacts and enchantments total, and you don't get much out of that. Whereas Lannery is always just good, solid ramp for your game. Do bear in mind that, again, this might not be good in a more proactive list, a list that's trying to win within that, turn 3 format, within the first 3 turns of the game you're trying to win. Lannery might not be for you. However, for those games that go mid-range, those strategies that want to play mid-range, Captain Lannery's fantastic ramp. You really can't beat treasures outside of gold tokens for artifact-based ramp. And if you can manipulate her in a deck where you're doing multiple combats, like you would Neheb Dreadhorde Champion, or any list Morag, the new Minotaur, who's just landfalling multiple combats, getting to use Captain Lannery multiple times, and it's on the swing, right? So unfortunately, it's not on the damage. If it were on damage, I would say double strike this girl. Like, there's ways to manipulate how many treasures you can produce around, but outside of getting multiple combats, you won't be making more than 1 treasure a turn. However, that's more than enough ramp, I think, for most mid-range lists. And if it just gives you the opportunity to color fix in a given turn, also very good. So she slots in very easily to multicolored list just based off the fact of her 2 generic, 1 red cost. Thank goodness she wasn't double red. But if you do need ramp for a 1 to 3 colored list, 4 colors, you've probably got better things to do. Captain Lannery is a fantastic include for said list. And that'll do it. That'll do it for Hidden Gems Red. I think I covered all the bases there. There's a whole lot of great cards in Red, and they're all used. Again, rarely a hidden gem to be seen in Red, sadly, but there are a handful of really great cards. There's some control cards I didn't mention. I just want to mention the one I find the most I used to say abusive, but the most relevant to the particular cEDH meta that I play into. But there are other control cards you can utilize, and of course other damage cards. I would even say Lightning Bolt is a hidden gem in Commander because I rarely see people run it, and 3 damage is like the benchmark for destruction. Like, you're gonna kill pretty much everything with a Lightning Bolt, yet you never see it. You never see it. Run more removal. That's my message for this video. But guys, if you enjoyed this, again, the best way to help support this channel is via Patreon. And again, all of the details for that are in the description down below. And of course, I have a special thank you to give out to one of my Patreon members. And that Patreon member is Adrian. Adrian, thank you so much for being a Brew Crew member. You are among the best. And for his opinion on the monthly topic I'll be reading for Brew Crew member Gunblade Knight. My thoughts are, how would it work? Do you have to claim you're playing cEDH first and then use that ban list? Would you unban certain cards, Flash, in non-cEDH, and would casual then be allowed to use Flash Hulk? I think it'd be more trouble than it's worth, and that people should try to find balance in deck construction. And I also believe that Wizards need to come up with counterplays for current problem cards, but they also need to be playable themselves. And that will do it for this week's video. Are there any hidden gems in Red I missed? Let me know in the comment section down below. I always love hearing what you all are playing that I'm missing out on, because I'm always trying to build a better competitive Commander. Again, my name is Patrick Marlette, and happy brewing, babies.